How can the Bruins get back to their dominant ways in 2025? Well, it starts with defense and sprinkle in a little offense.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. And hey, the Bruins, all right, it's obvious. It's been a lot of negativity around here lately. Mick Cronin, myself, everybody, the Bruins aren't going to make the tournament. The Bruins, okay, they're better than last year's team. And even last year's team, as poorly as they played at one point, went on a bit of a run. And UCLA has had a good stretch heading into the 2025 part of this calendar year. And the month of January has been brutal for UCLA. Been absolutely brutal. Now, what do they need to get some home cooking to win some of these ball games coming up? Well, I think the schedule is going to shift into UCLA's favor. After heading to Lincoln, coming back to UCLA, playing a tough Michigan team, then going all the way across to the East Coast in a coast-to-coast Big Ten battle against the Maryland and Rutgers affiliates of the Big Ten, just like UCLA and SC and Washington and Oregon are of the Midwest Conference of sorts. UCLA is going to have a lot of games on the West Coast. And unless they change the Iowa game, for now it's at Pauley Pavilion as where we record it. UCLA is going to have to figure out things defensively. Mick Cronin's calling card is the defensive side of the ball. I want to give credit to, Cronin doing lots of great work with UCLA teams, his prior teams at Cincinnati, even dating back to his initial years at Murray State. But you watch all these teams, and again, sometimes the offensive side is a little rough to watch when you don't have super veteran players who execute what Cronin wants or as good in one-on-one isolation basketball with the Bruins playing an offense, right? They're better shooters. They've got guys who can get buckets and make shots. Although if Bilodeau's cold and Daly and the Bruins aren't making three-point jumpers, then their offense is going to look pretty bad when they don't have a post player ready yet in the Dymar or ready yet in William Kyle III. They're just not ready to score consistently in the post. So you got to go to the defensive side. And that's probably a lot where these UCLA struggles have come from. Because even when UCLA was playing badly against New Mexico still only scored 70 points. They held Arizona to the mid-50s. They kept North Carolina, and they didn't let North Carolina just jump all over them. It was a late comeback. And then Gonzaga didn't just score at will against the Bruins when they're normally averaging 80-plus points a game. And then for some reason, between the end of December until that first game in January, UCLA has forgotten how to play Mick Cronin defense. Now, a lot of that has been teams figuring out the mismatches. The mismatch for UCLA is if you've got size, a lot of it, then it will eat UCLA alive. And the teams have been able to go after the Bruins, find a player in foul trouble, go after somebody, right? The Nebraska game, which if you feel how the game was played out, it seemed very similar to the Rutgers game, other than Eric Daly Jr.'s availability. Those games played out pretty much the same. A 7-0 UCLA spurt, followed by a team coming back and eventually pulling away with victory with a large portion of the second half controlled by Nebraska or Rutgers. Then you had the Maryland game where the Bruins were close but felt out of it, and then Maryland eventually pulled away. With those final 4 minutes, you look at the Rutgers and Maryland game, UCLA came back and won, made it a game. In the Maryland game, Cronin's like, I'm done with this, and just walked out. And then there's the Michigan game where, of all the weird ones, the Bruins were getting cooked and came back to take the lead, had a decent stretch where things were going their way with the foul calls and foul trouble, and still found a way to lose that game by 19 at home when they had a 4-point lead against the Wolverines, playing at home before everything was getting blown out of proportion. UCLA had a terrible mismatch with Michigan. And the big problem is UCLA is not hanging in there with either three-point shooting or defending the post. And these teams aren't turning it over as much as UCLA would like to do. So I think the biggest thing UCLA has to work on, they have to work on with their size mismatches that are their disadvantages. How can they force teams to miss shots? Because not every game is a team going to cough it up and then give you 20 turnovers and gift UCLA fast break points or quick transition offense so you can not have to play half-court offense, which can be ugly to watch at this moment for UCLA. All right? It can be absolutely rough to watch, rough to listen to if you're listening to Josh Lewin of the Browns. It's just, oh, man, what are they doing offensively? Well, Cronin wants this team to play defense and turn that into offense, and then the other part of the time, hope his shot makers can make shots, and that's how the Bruins are going on a run. And a large portion of UCLA's success over the last few years has been built on that. We saw last year's team, very young, couldn't shoot and score, and then we saw this year's roster was constructed the way it was and the way it has been. You're coming up, UCLA is going to play Iowa and Wisconsin. Those are teams, especially Iowa, which we'll preview a little bit more later, that will let you score the basketball. And I'll touch on UCLA scoring woes. I will. But UCLA, we'll learn a lot about their defense when you're facing an Iowa team that can score close to 80 points per game and still lose by 10, like they did to SC, and like they did by 30 plus to Wisconsin. Wisconsin is just as capable of putting up big numbers, like they did 100 in regulation multiple times, especially when they beat Arizona and Iowa. So those are teams where UCLA is going to be tested, pushed to the mental capacity when it comes to Mick Cronin's defensive matrix that he wants his team to play. Hustle, heart, diving, deflections, everything to earn that hustle bone for UCLA. Now, Wisconsin's coming to town in about 6 days. You've got the Iowa game on a Friday night. So both those teams are already either going to be in the West Coast or coming to the West Coast prior to the UCLA game by playing SC first. So they'll have their sea legs of West Coast games under them, like Iowa's been waiting for UCLA to come west. Wisconsin will be on the West Coast, I believe, to play SC first and then UCLA. So that's how it's going to build up. The Bruins must learn how to win games defensively without needing 20 turnovers and find ways, whether it's just riding with William Kyle III defensively. Remember last year, UCLA would throw out Nuba, they'd throw out Bona, and they'd go with the super athletic big, and Cronin's best defensive lineup is not his best scoring lineup. Well, if he's talking so much about how he can't give up 45 points in the second half to Rutgers, if he can't give up 42 points in a half to Nebraska, you look at the same thing in the Michigan game where you gave up 47 points in each half, and Maryland was just a consistent, slow drag that just was hard to watch in those games. I think UCLA should go first dealing with the defense. Ride your big men. At least find something that can go and handle the defensive side. All right, maybe Mata's getting pushed around. William Kyle III is not a finished product to work offensively for the Bruins. But if you're going to live and call out your players as being soft and delusional, and you're giving up size, then why not get some athleticism, mix it with some size, more than 10 minutes a game? Because Bilodeau trying to guard a 5, Daly trying to guard a 5, he can do it, but if you're asking him to do it for 40 minutes, is not going to work. We've seen it. We've seen it go afterwards. And if Kobe Johnson's in foul trouble, then your team is not going to get as many steals as you'd like, right? Because there are going to be some games when Kobe Johnson's going to go out there, rip the ball away, and he's going to get called for a soft contact foul. Because when UCLA is whistled very tightly, when the fouls are called tightly, the Bruins don't succeed as much. If you've noticed, when UCLA falters in games, it's when the whistles are blown a lot, there are a lot of free throws awarded to the opposition, and the Bruins can't get away with ripping the ball away, stealing the ball, playing ultra-physical defense. And Cronin talks about the free throws, but it's almost based off the officiating, which he got mad at Jeffrey Anderson in the Maryland game. So part of the thing is UCLA's got to learn how to defend without fouling and always needing turnovers. Now, they do that. That's their calling card. Good. But you can't just expect teams to just hand you the basketball, hand you the candy, and just go run away with it. No. Can you play good defense and live with the fact that these guys are just as good shooting the basketball and find a way to get some defensive things? and work that way. Now, offensively, it has been rough to watch as well. Where has it gone wrong? And how is the Iowa and Wisconsin matchups with all these West Coast games coming up going to help? We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. And I've always found that decluttering and refreshing my space can get me back into my routine, which can be so hard to get back into after the holiday season. Whether it's tidying up, clearing out, your space can give you a great thing. And Wayfair can give you everything you need, all within your budget. Whether it's the free and hassle-free delivery when you're looking at your furniture and selection to find pieces to spice up your furniture selection. Even for the larger items, Wayfair's site is so easy to navigate, and you can find everything you need in no time. There's something for every style and every home, no matter your space or your budget. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. All right, here we are. Second segment, kind of going into the offensive flow of things, / a mini Iowa preview as well. UCLA, the talk is, all right, how is the travel going to affect? Well, it certainly hasn't helped. There's a lot of things going off the court that aren't helping UCLA. Cronin said, yeah, their minds are everything. His players are delusional about how good they are. And the defense needs to be the calling card of this team, because if they don't show up defensively, they're giving up 80 points per game. They're not going to win all those games. They should be able to win those every once in a while, but they're not going to be able to win those games every single time out on Big Ten games on the road, maybe sometimes at home, but you just can't do that. Yet the offense needs to be a bit more spicy. You talk about the defense needing to travel for UCLA. Well, this UCLA team, 11-6, 4 straight losses, 2-4 in Big Ten play. You look at USC, who's also 11-6. They're actually 3-3 in the Big Ten Conference. And you're like, what's going on there? UCLA's in the tournament at the latest bracketology, and USC is anywhere close. That's where UCLA's pickup of quad one wins are helpful. New Mexico being currently slotted in as a last team in, well, the last 4 teams in as an NCAA tournament team helps. North Carolina picking it up helps. Arizona winning games helps. Gonzaga probably not going to lose a game for the next 2-3 months. It's totally going to help UCLA's case. All right. But all that goodwill that was built up is now maybe going to slowly come crumbling down the more you lose, because all the quad one wins, then they're going to point to, well, you had 30 chances at a quad one win. Sarcasm intended. But UCLA, you're not going to, at the end, they're going to start looking more, oh, you beat Rider and Boston and Lehigh and Idaho State and Cal State Fullerton as your big non-conference stretch. And the wins over the Oregons, the wins over those other teams in Big Ten / non-conference play in December will almost be forgotten. The way UCLA won lots of those games was the Bruins shooting well from 3. And they have gone ice cold in the month of January. Looking at the stats for UCLA as a team right now, looking at them right now as a team-wide shooting 3-point team, UCLA, if you didn't realize this, still averages close to 75 points a game. All right, this team, despite other offensive woes, averages close to 75 points a game and only allows 63 points per game. Marks that you're like, okay, if you look deeper into it, aren't going to tell the whole story, but not horrible. Not horrible at all. It's UCLA's 33% from 3. The opponents only shoot 31% from the floor from 3, so they're still out shooting their opponents from downtown. UCLA shooting close to 46% from the floor, the opposition shooting 42%. But then when you look Big Ten-wise, you're like, oh, kind of gets skewed. And you look at the month of January, the Bruins shot really well in December. Almost no travel other than to New York. And the UCLA Bruins lost that game. You mix in a lot more travel now. And the shooting, the scoring has not translated for the Bruins, which is a worry. Now, maybe that's going to help for the Bruins, who are going to be on the West Coast until February 11th. when they go play, I think they're going to play Illinois that night on a Tuesday. The Bruins have a long stretch at home. Long stretch. And this is funny because the women, they only have 2 more East Coast trips. The Bruins, I think, have what, 1, 2, 3 more? 3 more, maybe if you include the Big Ten Conference Tournament. You look at the Big Ten standings, UCLA is very close to being in that circle of the bottom set of teams that might not make it to their own conference tournament. I am fairly confident of UCLA making the conference tournament this year, but you want better seeding because you don't want to play 5 games in 5 days and log extra miles trying to beat bad teams, although the teams near the bottom of the Big Ten are not bad at all, but beating teams with bubble resumes just to boost your tournament standing and then just play extra games that are not necessary in the Big Ten tournament. Why do the NC State when you need it? UCLA doesn't need to do the NC State. Win 5 in 5 days or something just to get to the Final Four. The Bruins shouldn't have to do so. You don't want to get stuck in that position where you're leaving it all to the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee on Selection Sunday. If the Bruins are in bubble position, you don't want to get stuck near that bubble of the Big Ten tournament. If they're left out, you're not going to make the tournament. If you're the 12 seed in your own Big Ten tournament, the 10 seed, and you need to win quite a few extra games, you don't want to play those extra games. You want to get into the upper echelon where you get more buys, win a game that boosts the resume, and then get well rested for the NCAA tournament, which might throw the Bruins all the way across the country. You go from maybe playing a West Coast first and second round game, and maybe you get thrown all the way to Providence, Rhode Island, where some of those first round games are being held this year in the NCAA tournament. Or as the latest bracketology, which does not include the Rutgers loss from Joe Lunardi, has them going to Wichita with UCLA as a 7 seed playing St. Mary's. Oh, you win that game, and next thing you know, you're playing Kansas in the state of Kansas in Wichita. Like, you don't want to put yourself in that position. And how can the Bruins help themselves? By scoring the basketball. The Bruins have scores. They're a much better shooting team than last year. But Cronin, his calling card is not the offensive side. Maybe I've seen, the idea of throwing out an offensive coordinator, getting an offensive type coach to help him out. But Cronin is going to be loud, demonstrative, and want his team to be hustling on defense, deflecting, diving, going after all the basketballs, all the loose balls on the floor, and that will lead to better offense. But that's not always going to be the case when the Bruins are stuck in a high-scoring game. They can't get a stop because a guy is going off, or maybe they're playing Michigan in a Big Ten conference game. They're going to need to score. They can't just go ice cold when you're almost outscoring Michigan in a high-scoring affair, which didn't happen because then Michigan got red hot from 3. UCLA does have a player or two capable, but they're all ice cold. Dylan Andrews has fallen off the map right now. The problem is, with so much opportunity for Cronin to switch guys in and out, maybe the development isn't there like it was in years past, right? When he played 7 to 8, these guys would go in, develop, Cronin could maybe pull you, and then the guys would develop like Dylan Andrews did throughout the year, like Adem Bona slowly did through his first couple of years at UCLA to a defensive player of the year, a freshman player of the year in the Pac-12. Those guys don't get that opportunity this year while also being banged up like Eric Daly Jr. is, like Sky Clark is, sick like Dylan Andrews is. You mix all those things together with the travel, and the Bruins have forgotten how to shoot. They have forgotten how to score. And even though they score 74 points a game, that just doesn't tell the whole story. All right. We look game by game for UCLA these last few games from downtown. We start with the Nebraska game. UCLA shot 14% from 3. Against Michigan, UCLA shot 10% from 3. Against Maryland, the Bruins shot their best percentage of the new year, 33% from 3. And then against Rutgers, 31%. So only once in the new year, the new calendar year, in the month of January, has UCLA shot the 3 ball well enough where they've actually shot their current average. So while they're shooting at 33% from 3, that average has gone steadily down since they hit 12 threes against Gonzaga. They hit 10 against Prairie View, 9 of 18 against North Carolina, 12 of 23 against Oregon, 38% against Washington. And oh, by the way, while they shot terribly against Arizona, missed a bunch of free throws against the Wildcats. How did that win that game? It's because they played defense and forced a lot of turnovers and kept the Wildcats out of the paint just enough. Mind you, their best big man, their starting big man, did not play in that game against UCLA. But the Bruins played decent enough defensively over the last 9 minutes where Arizona did not allow a field goal. The defense UCLA wants to play is to replicate what they did finishing against Arizona, while the offense has to shoot the three. Cronin has built this team to be a much better shooting team, and I think part of it has been, well, Cronin got Dominic Harris to be an elite shooter. That is non-existent. So that's going to put a lot more pressure on the shoulders of Stefanovic. And he got thrust into the starting lineup. And while I don't want him to be the number one starting option, I'd like him to get more shots. That means I'd like to see Sky Clark shoot more shots. And he has been, it seems like, a little bit banged up since the Nebraska game. I want Sky Clark to average 10 to 15 points a game and get more shots from downtown because he's got a pretty smooth jumper from deep. He does. He was capable of doing that when he was at Louisville, when he put up like 30-plus points against an eventual Final Four team at NC State in the early stages of their ACC tournament run. Bilodeau's not a consistent three-point shooter, and not always is he going to go 0 for 7. And until UCLA puts him as a 4 instead of going against the other team's big men, these struggles might continue. But Bilodeau and Daly, when they're on fire, this team can be unbeatable. You all have to look at the UCLA three-point shooting numbers, because when they make just a little bit better than 35%, they are pretty much unbeatable. Unbeatable. When they shoot 20% and worse, UCLA against tournament teams like New Mexico is loss. When they played Nebraska, close to a tournament, you don't know about these bubble teams. Nebraska, Maryland, Rutgers, under their average, they are just woeful offensively, and that's when they turn it over and they force a lot. So it's finding the right combination of maybe you throw the big man in there more and just leave it. You just live with it. You just live with having the big men in there so you can put Bilodeau at the 4, give him better opportunities and matchups, Daly to the 3, you live with Johnson at the 2, and then you tell Sky Clark, all right, I want you to shoot a lot of buckets. You cut down the time for Dylan Andrews significantly. Then you bring in Stefanovic as the 2. You move in Trent Perry. You move in Sebastian Mack. If you go small for segments as opposed to the majority of the game, maybe that can free up shooters, get UCLA more rebounding, and get better matchups as opposed to having every guy from the 3 spot on going against a bigger, worse matchup having to shoot. And if they're not making it, hey, that's not as good. The Bruins these last few games have put up 58, 75, 61, 68. So they've only cracked 70 points once. And the one time they did is when they lost by 19 and gave up 94. That's not going to be a recipe for success when the defense isn't there. And sometimes you got to win your game with an offensive night. You just have to. And until then, the Bruins might be a rough one. But here's where it gets good. Iowa doesn't play defense. We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you're paying for twice? Well, it's happened for me because, hey, there's quite a few subscriptions I'm looking at. I'm like, why am I paying for that multiple times? Well, it's easy that with Rocket Money to help track all those down, and it's like having a personal assistant for all your finances where you can help and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and help lower your bills so you can grow your savings and reach all the financial goals you want to in the new year here in 2025. Rocket Money, over 5 million users that have saved over $500 million in canceled subscriptions, up to $740 a year per member when using the app's premium services. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, so I've been talking about UCLA. Got to play defense. Obviously, they've got to learn how to score. So both those things will be immediately challenged for UCLA. All right. The Bruins can win this game against Iowa, hopefully in Pauley Pavilion. Nothing's changed at the recording of this podcast, but it's going to be on the West Coast. But Iowa, in their most recent game, they scored 89 points. You're like, man, the Bruins aren't playing well defensively. They can't shoot. Well, Iowa is a very welcome matchup for Mick Cronin. And maybe if his team plays mediocre defense, just decent defense, the Bruins can still win this game by 10 to 15 points. Not a guarantee with the way they're playing, but Iowa has scored 85 plus points, close to that, twice this year, and lost by 10 or more points. They lost by 31 to Wisconsin, giving up over 110 to the Badgers. They most recently just played in the Galen Center, took on USC, lost, 99 to 89? And it's like, okay, let's bring on the Iowa Hawkeyes, all right? In the game against Wisconsin, Iowa shot almost 60% in the first half and was still down 10. They shot better than 50% against USC in the first half, and they were still down double figures heading into the halftime. All right? Welcome signs for UCLA to crack the code offensively. Iowa's scoring defensive numbers are in the 300s in the country. 300s. How many points per game does Iowa give up? This team gives up, let's talk about it, 78 points per game. They give up more points per game than UCLA averages. Now, Iowa scores close to 89, 90 points a game. Even UCLA's slump defensively, I think they're going to hold Iowa at least 15 points, at least 15 to 20 points shy of what they normally do. At least. When a team's averaging 89 points per game, now they're already going to be on the West Coast waiting to see how the Bruins travel. This could be a rough travel return before the Bruins hit it. So I think maybe they'll be tired defensively. But even a team that's playing bad under Mick Cronin, as much as he's been talking about soft, delusional, everything, and a lot of criticism coming from myself and everybody, I'd still like to believe this team, UCLA, is going to keep Iowa from scoring 89 points unless it goes to overtime. The good news is the Bruins should have their way scoring the basketball because the 78 points per game that Iowa gives up is one of the worst marks in the country, right? When you're going into the 300s to see where Iowa's scoring defense is, that is a good sign for UCLA. Iowa allows 33% from three from their opponents, just a tick above what UCLA shoots as a team. And the other thing is Iowa shoots the ball well from three. So can the Bruins guard the three and shoot the three ball well? It might be as simple as that, getting their way against a Hawkeye team that has not prided themselves on defense. No. Because SC has gone through their struggles under their first year new head coach in Eric Musselman. But Musselman is going to find his stride and make them a dangerous competitor, whether it's this year, next, just on the bubble of the tournament, making it late. You know the Trojans will be a tough battle when the Bruins play them at the Galen Center on that Monday night, January 27th. It will be. And it should be a rocking atmosphere, hopefully. The Bruins have a perfect matchup. Everything going wrong. The sky is falling. Still everything in front of them that they want to accomplish is there. But this is their midseason skid that tends to happen under Mick Cronin, although this is more the worst of times. Iowa coming to town means UCLA has to score the ball. If UCLA wins this one low scoring, then that tells me a lot that, hey, they figured it out defensively because Iowa can score the ball. And if UCLA holds them under 60, we should be really impressed. They hold them under 70, still impressed. But what I want to see is UCLA go out there and score 85. 85 points against the Iowa Hawkeyes in a matchup that represents UCLA's strength versus Iowa's strength. In Iowa's weakness versus UCLA's weakness, scoring the basketball versus Iowa's inability to get a stop at crucial times, any point during the ballgame. Because the Hawkeyes do get cold at times from downtown, right? You live and die by the three. You're shooting 40%. Still means you miss 6 out of 10 of those shots. And I like to believe Cronin's going to do just enough to find out a defensive scheme that holds Iowa to 70. And if you hold Iowa to 70, they're 20 points off their regular scoring marks, or well off that, whatever it is, right? It's can the Bruins put up 80 points and start scoring the basketball. This is a welcome matchup for UCLA. If they lose this one versus Iowa and they still look sluggish and tired, then it could still lean itself to a travel loss back west. But if they're 11-7, then they start pushing this danger territory, 2-5 in Big Ten if they lose this game of, are they going to make the NCAA tournament? All the goodwill, all the quad one wins are going to start stacking up into, okay, how do they match up well with all these losses, all right? Because you don't want to be a 12-loss Big Ten team trying to earn yourself in when there's already 10 other teams above in the pecking order. You go beat Iowa, you slap them down further, you're equal with them in the Big Ten standings because Iowa's 3-3, UCLA's 2-4. You win, you both go to 3-4 with the tiebreaker by beating them. And if it comes to seeding in the Big Ten tournament, it comes to head-to-head, if you're battling for bubble spots, this is a huge game for UCLA to win and slot themselves higher up this Big Ten totem pole that they're learning how to travel, how everything is much tougher to navigate than it has been with the Pac-12 in recent years. But I think Iowa will be a good matchup for UCLA to win and get back on it and fix some of these inefficiencies from three, fix and challenge the defensive schematics of Mick Cronin. And if they can figure it out, should be a UCLA win. If not, then the sky is pretty close to falling. Chicken Little might be calling. But I hope the Bruins by Friday night will be balling. And get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA, fight. This has been Locked on UCLA. Zach signing off. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. It's been Locked on UCLA. Go Bruins.